In this video, I'm going to give you my final picks for UFC San Antonio. We're going to look at Draftkings, we'll talk strategy, we'll build cash game lineups, tournament lineups, and I have some free money for you, so make sure you watch until the end. As always, you can call me Kunith. Let's make some money this week. If you haven't already, go back and watch the predictions video from earlier in the week. That's a full card breakdown. We look at every fight on the card, and that's more focused on betting. And for all of our official bets, you can see them on kunithmma.com. That and the video will be linked in the description and in a pinned comment. Before we talk about anything, we need to talk about the change that has come to the card. We went from 13 fights to 12 fights because we lost the fight with Haley Cowan and Tamaris Vidal.
No! God, please, no! No!
I know, devastating news. But even without that fight, even with just 12 fights, we can get really creative with the lineups this week considering how much value there is and how close these lines are. This is a fight night card. It's not a pay-per-view, so the lines for these aren't juiced up. The lines on this are tight. They're closer than college-ruled notebooks. Which brings us to our first order of business, value plays. Plays at 8,000 salary and below, pieces that you'll need to make your lineup work. We have quite a few of them this week, and at the very top you have Preston Parsons because of the way that he's going to fight. Preston Parsons is going to bring pace, pressure, he's going to look for takedowns, and he's going to look for submissions. He did exactly that in his last fight, and while he didn't get the finish on the mat, he did put up 108 Draftkings points. And with Trevin Giles, nothing really jumps off the page. He fights at a slow pace, he tries to fight behind a jab, he's not really looking for a ton of takedowns of his own. He has a way of slowing fights down, creating a boring pace that doesn't result in a whole lot of Draftkings points, and that's what makes it hard to pull the trigger on Preston Parsons this week. But if he does have his way, if he does find a submission, or even if he just gets in top position once a round, then he's going to score you a lot of Draftkings points. Every takedown is worth 5 points. Every second of control time is worth 0.03 points. Parsons is a grappler. You saw last time he got 4 takedowns, almost 9 minutes of control time, but he's not laying and praying his way to a decision win. He's going to stay busy on top with his striking as well. So with the style of fight that Preston Parsons brings, he has a good chance of being one of the higher scoring fighters on the slate, which builds excellent value into his $8,000 price. Our next value play comes from $7,900 Victor Altamirano in a fight where you probably need the winner of either way. Benicio Salvador is either going to knock this guy out in the first round, or Victor Altamirano is going to rally back and beat him in the second or third round with his pace, his pressure, his wrestling. And I expect him to lean on that wrestling early and often here, considering the power that Benicio Salvador is going to throw back at him. And what I love about Altamirano from a betting perspective and from a DraftKings perspective is that this guy can fight through adversity. Some guys on this card cannot. There are a few fighters on this card who have a tendency to look for a way out when things aren't going their way. Victor Altamirano is not that guy. Even last time out against Daniel Da Silva, he gets dropped early, he's in bottom position, things are looking grim, they're looking bleak, and then he scores 134 Draftkings points and wins in the first round. And this number right here, 94 strikes in the first round, is the most impressive piece of all of this. Once Benicio Salvador is tired, I could see Victor Altamirano really pouring it on like that one guy who poured mustard on the sleeping dude.
Oh, shit. Oh. God. This is shit.
Endless cardio, heart for days, and a guy that will fight for your money and has one of the highest ceilings. We've already seen him reach that ceiling on the entire slate. Give me Victor Altamirano is probably one of the better value plays that we'll talk about today. Now for our next value play, I think I'm on an island. I don't see many people publicly giving this guy a whole lot of love. A lot of the consensus is that this guy's going to get starched. But I think that Albert Duraev, if he is able to get Chidi on his back for even a second, probably goes on to win this fight. Duraev has some real underrated cardio, underrated toughness, and if he's able to get his grappling going against Chidi, who has been out grappled in the past, then he probably gets a finish and he probably scores a whole lot of Draftkings points in the process with his takedowns, with his control time, staying busy on top and doing it inside the distance. You're also looking at excellent leverage. Chidi and Njokuani came into the UFC on fire, right? Knockouts here, knockouts there, and he's going to come in at high ownership. Albert Duraev's probably going to be one of the lower owned fighters on the entire slate, so I do like the leverage. I like like the grappling upside more than anything, and I think that Albert Duraev can absolutely win this fight. And yes, Chidi has that power, but you can't sleep on the toughness of Albert Duraev. And if Albert Duraev just goes zombie on him, just waits him out, I think that Chidi and Njokuani after the first round is going to be nothing. I think after round 1, that Njokuani power is going to be gone. And we saw it last time against Greg Rodriguez. As soon as he was done and he was tired, no more. I'm ready to go home. It happens. We see it in the UFC all the time. Khabib talked about it. When you get tired, when you fatigue, it doesn't matter. You don't think the same. You don't want the same things. You just don't want to feel that feeling anymore. I could totally see it get into the second round and Njokuani throws a hook. Duraev's out of range. Chidi whiffs on it and he just gives him that look like, all right, man, I'm done. I'm done. I wouldn't sleep on Albert Duraev this week. I like him as a value play. Salary-wise, we almost skipped the man of the hour, Marlon Vera, who is a 50-50 fight or better against anyone in the world. 4-fight winning streak. He's got 7 knockdowns in his last 3 fights. The dude is a problem. Cory Sandhagen is there to be hit, and he doesn't take damage all that well. Now, what you don't love for Marlon Vera is not only that he's a slow starter and that he's typically getting outstruck. I know everybody talks about that. I don't care that he's getting outstruck. I don't care that he's a slow starter. If the guy's knocking people dead, he's knocking people dead. What do you want him to do? If you're landing 20 and he's landing 1, but that 1's got you looking up at the ceiling, then I'm fine with it. If he was some dude who had cardio issues, I would say, okay, that might be an issue. That might be a problem, but that's not the case here. Cheeto is better late than he is early, and for that reason, I think that he wins this fight and he probably finishes Cory Sandhagen. Now, here's the problem, though, going back to the main issue. He's got all these knockdowns, he's got all these finishes, but if you look at his last 4 fights, he's scored 98, 95, 129, which is fantastic, and then 95. Even before that, the 3rd round finish over Andre Ewell, 81. He's got 86 before that. We've got a big sample size to look at. You see the 105, 104, 108. That's what you need this week. But the 92, 83, 66, 80. I know this is a 5-round fight, but at the same time, if Marlon Vera's not breaking 100 DraftKings points and coming in at 53% ownership roughly, then you're looking at a situation where he probably doesn't show up on the optimal lineup. And I think you could say the same for Cory Sandhagen. I think this is a great fight to stack. Obviously, in cash games, you stack it. In smaller field single entry, it makes sense to stack it. I don't think there's a way that the loser scores less than 60 points, but I do think that there are plenty of ways that the winner scores less than 100. So just tread lightly if you want to do this. But Chito Vera, obviously, he's got that ceiling. He's got that power. If he wins at this price, you're in a good spot and you'll cash anyway. But if you want that top of the top, that 1% lineup, I don't know if this is absolutely what you need to do, but just something to consider. Next, we have a y'all must have forgot situation on our hands with Alex Perez. Alex Perez is damn good, and I think on his best night, he runs through Manel Kape. I think he's got better kicks than Manel Kape. I think he's got better pace than Manel Kape, better wrestling, better jiu-jitsu. Where he's at a disadvantage might be in the physical strength, just raw athleticism, explosive power. But those attributes, 1, aren't always on display in Manel Kape fights, and 2, don't guarantee that you're going to win. I think Alex Perez has better fight IQ as well, and I think this is a very winnable fight for him. I'm surprised that he's as big of an underdog as he is. I guess I'm not surprised because he hasn't won a fight in 3 years. But at the same time, I do think that Alex Perez is getting a little bit disrespected on the line, and I think that he's very live to win this fight. If he does win, it's probably inside the distance. If it's a decision, it's because he's using his wrestling and winning more rounds, but I think that Alex Perez probably wins this fight inside the distance, and if that's the case, he's scoring a lot of DraftKings points. Just to go through some of them, we saw 122 against Formiga, we saw 101 against Jordan Espinoza, 97 against Mark De La Rosa in a decision, 134 against Torres. A decision at 87 points isn't great, but he does win that fight by decision with 5 takedowns. So the finishing upside is there, he just needs to capture it. And I know we've had a lot of value plays so far. We don't have that many fights on the slate, but again, these are a lot of closely lined fights, and I have one more for you in the form of Andrea Lee. No one would be surprised if Andrea Lee won this fight. Not a spot that I absolutely want to hang my hat on when it comes to your tournaments, but somebody who's definitely viable for a cash game. Andrea Lee's tricky on the mat. She's got good pace in the stand-up. Maycee Barber cannot strike her way out of a paper bag, and I think that Andrea Lee has sneaky power, at least good enough placement to put Maycee Barber down at some point. Maybe not knock her out, but maybe get a flash knockdown that sits her on her butt. Definitely my least favorite, least confident value play of the week, but she does have a path to victory, and I think she could win this fight. Now, if you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and comment what your value play is for the week, or you can comment happy birthday to Oscar. Yes, I remembered. Now we can look at some cash games for the week, and if you're not playing cash games, leave right now. I'm just kidding, you don't need to leave, but I don't know how many times I need to tell you to play your cash games. Cash game lineup construction really comes down to 3 parts. First, you're looking at the stack. This is a great main event to stack. You've got 5 rounds, both guys throw a ton of strikes, they probably won't finish the other very early. Good main event to stack. Phase 2 is looking at the punt plays. Now there's really 2 places that you can land, maybe 3 if you wanted to this week, and I think that would be Alex Perez, you got Andrea Lee, and you got Austin Lingo. One of the 3 I'm fine with. Let's say for the purposes of this, we'll go with Andrea Lee because she probably doesn't get finished. I don't think any of those 3 get finished this week, but let's just look at Andrea Lee for example. Now we've got 8,900 left over, and this is phase 3. Phase 3 is find the 3 winners. And I say that because you have a guaranteed winner from the main event, you have a punt play in Andrea Lee, and you just have to assume that she loses. You assume that she loses, but you put her in your lineup because she probably goes the distance, giving her a safer scoring floor than some of the other losers that might get finished. With 8,900 left over, I'd probably go Manuel Torres, Steven Peterson, and come up here to Tucker Lutz. You've left 300 salary on the table, but I think you've put together a pretty solid lineup. If you wanted to make one adjustment to this, you can come off of Andrea Lee, come down here, grab Alex Perez, and I think that's just as good. Those are for your cash games, your head-to-heads, 50-50s, double-ups, contests where you double your entry if you come in the top half or close to it. If you're new and you didn't see our videos from last week, you can watch the final picks video from last week where we talk about the importance of cash game versus putting your money in a big tournament. The reality is when you play in these big tournaments, the likelihood of you winning and the likelihood of you doubling your money is very low. And that's for multiple reasons that we talked about in the UFC 286 final picks video. If you're going to be playing tournaments, which I recommend you should play tournaments because that's the whole point. You want to be able to turn a small amount of money into a bigger amount of money. The best way to do that is by looking for single entry, 3 max contests, or just contests that don't have a big field size as it is. There's the $12 single entry, the $40, the $100 that they always put in there, and you can create your own contests as well. Which brings us to tournament lineups and how do we build them this week. We'll start by taking a look at what I think most people are going to do. This is the chalk. This is the lineup that your brother, your father, and your best friend have. And we'll go fighter by fighter to kind of explain why. Chidi Vera is probably going to come in at higher ownership than Cory Sandhagen. He's in the main event. He scores a lot of points typically, not slate breaking points sometimes, but a lot of points normally. Given that he's the headliner, he's the bigger star out of the 2, he's the cheaper play out of the 2, he's going to carry high ownership. I see Preston Parsons carrying high ownership. He's got a low price tag. I think publicly a lot of people are on him. A lot of people are typically low on Trevin Giles, and it makes sense as to why. Victor Altamirano, I think that he and Salvador are going to carry decent ownership, and that makes sense. Victor Altamirano is the side that a lot of people, especially a lot of content creators, are on, so that does have some kind of sway on the market. Not a ton, but some. Manuel Torres finishes everything. He finishes all of his sentences. He finishes his dinner. He finishes his vegetables. He does it all. Scored a ton of points in his UFC debut, and I could see him doing that again. I don't think a lot of people are all that high on Trey Ogden, especially when it comes to the striking. He's not a great striker. Chidi Njokuani is always going to garner high ownership. We've seen him knock people dead. He's just going to be one of those guys that people put into their Draftkings lineups every time he fights. Manel Kape is the same way. A lot of people are going to play Manel Kape. He's got big power. He's fighting Alex Perez, who hasn't won a fight in 3 years. I could see a ton of people getting there. Is it a bad lineup? No. Is it my favorite lineup? I don't think so. So I'll blow it up and tell you what I think makes a lot of sense this week. Let's say you did want to go with Chito, and I'll give you some other looks as well, but let's say Chito is our first piece. 84.80 left over. Now, if you're playing in big tournaments, you might as well just go Austin Lingo. First round upside. You've seen Nate the Train has lost in the first round twice in the UFC. If you're playing the $15 big contest that I tell you not to play, if you're playing it anyway, running Chidi Vera and Austin Lingo side by side is making a ton of sense. And then you can come right up here to Manuel Torres. You've got Steven Peterson, who's probably going to cook Lucas Alexander to the bone. At this point, if you went with Chidi Njokuani and you came up here to somebody like CJ Vergara, or you came to Tucker Lutz, that makes sense. And again, you know I like Albert Duraev to win this week, but I can't ignore what I think Chidi Njokuani is capable of, or rather what I know he's capable of. And the same could be said for Austin Lingo. I think that Nate the Train wins, but you don't always just play the guys you think are going to win. That's the biggest problem that most players have. They get caught up thinking, I just want to play the these guys because I think all these guys are going to win, and that's not always the best way to approach your lineups. You want to look at value, you want to look at leverage, you want to look at ownership, you want to look at upside, and this is the way to capture that. Just playing the guys that you think are going to win probably has disappointed you in the past and is going to keep disappointing you. Sometimes it works, most of the time it doesn't. Don't build your lineups just by thinking I like this guy so he should go out there and do what he needs to do for me, or at least I'm hoping for that. No. I'll give you another look with Cheeto, and we'll look at Sandhagen as well, and a lineup that doesn't contain the main event. We'll build a couple. Let's say you went with Cheeto, let's say you went with Altamirano, let's say you came down here, grab somebody like Alex Perez. 9,000 left over. At this point, you can come here to somebody like Steven Peterson, and now you could just afford these expensive guys. I think this makes sense as well. You've spent all the salary, but I don't know if this comes in at the highest of ownership when you got guys like Steven Peterson and Alex Perez and these two who are right next to each other in salary. Let's say you liked Cory Sandhagen this week and you came here to Preston Parsons. Let's say you said, Kunith, I like Cory Sandhagen to win. I like Preston Parsons to win. Can you make something with them? I'm doing it right now. Why are you bothering me? 83.50 left over. You need a cheap piece. You could come to somebody like Duraev in this situation. 86.66 left over. You can come right here, Manuel Torres. You can grab Steven Peterson. 8,800 left over. You're kind of stuck in this range, so you'd go here at Victor Altamirano. You've left 900 salary on the table, and that's okay. Don't be afraid to do that, especially in the bigger contests. Do not be afraid to leave salary on the table. We've seen slates taken down where people have left 2,000 salary on the table. It's not impossible. Another Sandhagen look. Let's say we went with Sandhagen and we came all the way down here, grabbed Austin Lingo. We followed that up with Alex Perez with that early upside. 9,100 left over. Let's say you came here to Chidi and Njokuani, and then you can grab these expensive pieces up here. You'll notice it's really hard to get Nate Landwehr into a lot of lineups with the way that the salary shakes out, especially considering CJ Vergara's got a better matchup than he does. I think Lutz has a better matchup than he does. The scary part for both of these guys here, though, is that the opponent has a ton of first round upside. That's the part that worries you about both of them. I think that could actually be said across the board here. I think that if Austin Lingo doesn't knock Nate Landwehr out in the first round, he probably loses. But if Nate Landwehr loses, it's because he was knocked out in the first round. You get me? Now, let's say we built a lineup around Nate the Train without the main event, just to give ourselves a look. Let's say we went with Preston Parsons, we went with Manuel Torres, we went with Victor Altamirano, came down here to Andrea at 7,100, 9,100 left over. If I were in this situation, I'd either go Sandhagen or Peterson. Peterson's definitely going to be the lower owned of the two, so that would really be a decision that you make based on the contest that you're in. If you are playing the $15 big contest, or you're playing the $3 20 max contest with a ton of people in it, then you probably go Steven Peterson over Cory Sandhagen just for that leverage. But if you're in a small field single entry, the $100 with 277 playing, then you could take him out and you can go Cory Sandhagen there just for the safety that comes with it. You can find tools for this, projections, data, DraftKings strategy guide, all on KunithMMA.com. There's also a growing community of very informed guys that we all bounce ideas off of, whether that's through the DM, starting to do it more in the community forum. A lot going on there, more the merrier. KunithMMA.com, check it out, see if it works for you, and if it doesn't, then you probably can't take a punch. Now we'll just wrap up by looking at Underdog Fantasy. This is where you can get that deposit match up to $100 by using promo code Kunith or just hitting the link that's going to be in the description and in a pinned comment. Very fun, simple, easy, and potentially very profitable way for you to attack these slates, and you can do this with other sports as well. Football, basketball, whatever. For other leagues that are season long, like NBA, like MLB that's coming up, they have best ball as well, which is really cool. You basically are playing season long, but for a lot of money. It's always fun. DraftKings offers that as well, but DraftKings also isn't offering you a deposit match, so get with it or get lost. Some of my favorite this week are definitely Cory Sandhagen, higher than 109.5 significant strikes. CJ Vergara, higher than 29.5 significant strikes, looks very good. Victor Altamirano, over 56.5 significant strikes, makes sense. I like Tucker Lutz, higher than a half of a finish. I'll give you one more to complete this. I like Holm, higher than 48.5 significant strikes. I think the significant strikes numbers for a lot of these are pretty low. That gives us a 20 times multiplier, so obviously if we were to come here, say you put $50 in, $1,000 payout. If you put $50 in, they're going to give you $50 to play with. You put 25 in, they'll give you an extra 25 to play with that can come up to this 50, or you just make small bets along the way and build up that bankroll as well in a safer way. And if you want to be extra safe, they also offer insurance, which means you don't need to be perfect. You can go 4 out of 5, 3 out of 4, 2 out of 3, and still make money. Again, that's Underdog Fantasy. Highly recommend. Very good customer service as well when you go on Twitter and things like that. So Underdog Fantasy, you can use the promo code Kunith, hit the link in the description or a pinned comment, get your deposit match, and you start playing today. If you've made it to this point in the video, I have something to tell you. I don't actually, but I really do appreciate it. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm. I wish you the best of luck this week.